Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, you'll be glad to know that the post-Aston Villa hangover has long since dissipated. All childish celebrations of our respective league finishes has been put to one side, Kieran. I'm even telling Palace fans off for using the hashtag #MindTheGap. It's childish, I tell them. Stop doing that. I'm actually looking forward to... I inadvertently agreed to appear in front of a group of London-based Brighton fans, Kieran, in a couple of weeks' time, which I've been regretting for some months, but I'm now actually really, really looking forward to. But hashtag #MindTheGap. It's childish. Let's not do that. How are you, Kieran, anyway?
I'm still irritatingly cheerful. I know you're always disappointed in me, but I've seen the odds for Brighton getting relegated in 24-25, and I've lumped on them already, such is my fans' cynical view of the industry.
Well, once we've actually discovered what actually really happened at Chelsea with Pochettino, then I think we'll probably have to look into the finances of that and how much that's going to cost Chelsea. But you mentioned last week that there seems to be something in Brighton's accounts about a payment for De Zerbi going somewhere else. So everyone's putting two and two together and making Chelsea for him.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. It might be close season for the football industry. It's not going to be a close season for us, I suspect. There'll be many, many hairs let loose across the fields over the course of the next couple of months.
Yeah, so you say you're irritatingly cheerful, Kieran. When it comes to Chelsea, you have been doing a lot of chuntering in the last season about Graham Potter and Caicedo, various other players. What a goal by Caicedo, by the way. Where did that come from?
Brilliant. Yes.
So I get the feeling that if it does turn out that De Zerbi has gone to Chelsea, that chuntering will continue.
I think you can safely say that will be Chunter Major at this end.
I believe he used to be your fag at Eton, didn't he, old Chunter Major? Whatever happened to his young brother. It's Newsday, Kieran. This first news story is so new that all I got was a rather terse message from producer guy saying I've added a story about Manchester United at the top of the news list. And it looks like a fascinating one, Kieran, but perhaps you could talk us through it.
Right. I will be as guarded as I can in the comments because they say this story is so new that I put out a few feelers to our secret lawyers, but we are recording this on a weekday and they do have other work commitments. The story, which is running in a few of the newspapers, is in respect of Dan Ashworth. Now, here's a contract of employment with Newcastle United Football Club. We don't know the details of that contract of employment, but there will be clauses which will presumably prevent him from moving to another employer without the express permission or approval of Newcastle. And if the story, and they'll pick this up from the Times and elsewhere, if this story is true, he appears to have contacted Manchester United's upcoming chief executive and said, I want to come to Old Trafford. And people moving jobs, they're perfectly entitled to do so. But it doesn't look as if the right process has been undertaken. He made the error, if the story is true, of copying himself in on the email. So I think it looks like he's gone from his dan.ashworth@gmail.com or whatever it is. I don't know what his email address is. And has copied himself in on a BCC, on a blind copy, to his Newcastle United email address. Oh. Now, that is the property of Newcastle United Football Club. So he therefore appears to have effectively punched himself in the face because Newcastle, if we must always caveat this, Newcastle would appear to be in a position to say, this looks like some form of inappropriate poaching, potentially. Yeah. What other information have you given to the recipient? Because Newcastle, when they recruited Dan Ashworth from Brighton, they paid compensation. And initially, again, Brighton put him on gardening leave. Gardening leave was a long period of time. Newcastle say, right, we'll buy you out of the gardening leave for X. It looks like Manchester United are trying to do the same. If the stories are true, they've offered £2 million, which is less than Newcastle paid to Brighton. Newcastle are looking for substantially more. And this looks a bit embarrassing from the point of view of A, Dan Ashworth, schoolboy error here, and B, it doesn't reflect necessarily particularly well on Manchester United if the approach was inappropriate. Now, we must caveat this. We say, A, this is a bit of speculation, and B, I know, and you know, and everybody in the football industry knows, and every fan knows that you always sound people out before you make a formal approach anyway. But there are ways and means of doing things, and this appears to be a bit of amateur hour, as Sparks once sang.
Yes, I'd be interested to hear what our lawyers have to say about this, Kieran, because you could almost argue this is a de facto resignation, just saying I want to come to another club. Isn't it strange as well? Even 10 years ago, you wouldn't have ever predicted that the comings and goings of directors of football, the speculation about whether Dougie Freeman is going to Manchester United or Newcastle, speculation about many other people as well, would ever become newsworthy. Secondly, and I can't tell you who told me this, Kieran, is an ex-Premier League manager. It just vindicates his theory. We were chatting a couple of years ago and there'd been a similar story. Somebody had been caught out saying something in print that they shouldn't have done. And he just said, don't commit yourself to... He said, there's something to be said for the old days when you just meet at a motorway service station on the bridge across the M1. No one knows you there. You have your chat. You don't commit to print. You don't email. You don't give him your phone number. Move on. I can't even tell you the circumstances of why this ex-Premier League manager told me this, but at the time, I wasn't impressed with his theory. But now, I think there's something in what he said, Kieran.
Yeah, I think Uncle Terry will be disappointed in Dan Ashworth. You don't leave a paper trail. And by all accounts, and this is going slightly left field, he's not my favourite person by a very long chalk. Donald Trump doesn't have an email address because that way he's got no evidence in writing of anything that he has done or has not done.
No. You and I have probably watched a lot of crime drama over the years, Kieran. Not my favourite genre, but we all know that bit in the crime drama when the judge points out that if the defendant doesn't wish to testify, you cannot infer anything from that. You can when Donald Trump decides not to testify. Or rather, when Donald Trump's lawyers sit on him to say you're not testifying. This is an interesting story that we'll follow as it unfolds. You're the second news story, Kieran, because despite it being a busy week news-wise, we want to talk about some analysis that you've done about ticket prices.
Yes. One of the things that I do sort of at the end of every season is to try to look at the direction of travel in terms of where clubs are getting money from. And we are aware that the current TV deal between the Premier League and the domestic broadcasters is flatlining. The Premier League is also pushing very much that the new TV deal, which is coming in 2025, is fantastic. It's a record, £6.4 million. And so I go, well, hold on. That's because it's 4 years instead of 3. Actually, the cost per season is the same. And because you're committing to the broadcasters more matches, the cost per match being broadcast is actually decreasing. So if we're getting no more money from broadcasters and kit deals, we know that kit merchandise prices are going up, but kit deals are not as lucrative, apart from the very elite clubs, as many fans think. Where are clubs going to target next? And like it or not, and we don't, it looks as if that target is now going to be fans in terms of matchday prices. So I did an analysis. Every club, their total matchday revenue for the past couple of seasons that we've got, so that's 21-22 and 22-23, looked at the number of home matches that they played, looked at the average attendance per match, and worked out how much clubs were generating. And then you have to be a little bit careful because the figures shown in the club accounts are excluding VAT. So then I add VAT on and so on. The average price for a ticket in the Premier League in 22-23, including VAT, was around about £45. So, that is not great. And that actually covers an awful lot. At Chelsea, who had the most expensive tickets, it worked out as £91 per fan per match, whereas Nottingham Forest were very much at the lowest. And people say, I know Chelsea fans, I know my season ticket price is steep, but it's not 91 quid. What you need to remember is that match day includes corporate tickets, hospitality, as well as the regular crew at Stamford Bridge or Anfield or Selhurst, wherever it's going to be. But the fact that it's increased by 11% over the season, and we are seeing more and more noises coming out. Arsenal have just announced their price rise. And I think you've got to give the Arsenal Supporters Trust a lot of credit for going into that. We know that there have been issues with senior fans at Spurs and also at West Ham, from some West Ham fans that I'm speaking to, that you either pay full price or you end up getting shifted around. We always say that part of the enjoyment of going to football is because you're sitting with Tom or Joe or Diane, whoever it's going to be, who sits next to you and around you. And I don't know very much about these people, but I do count them as friends, because you don't see them outside of football, but they are part of your match day experience. And you always know that such and such a person's going to start moaning after 10 minutes, and such a person can never see anything but, even when you're 6-0 down at home, all of those goals were clearly offside. And that part of the relationship is part of our experience of the match. And forcing the fans to be shifted is not a good thing. We're also seeing clubs trying to shift, or some clubs trying to shift away from season ticket holders, because the private equity organisations, they're revenue maximisers. They do not want people like you and me at football, Kevin. We have served our time. We did our bit in the 70s, 80s and 90s when nobody was interested in football. Now that football's the sexiest thing on the planet, let's attract the more middle class, the tourist fans, the fans who will go to the megastore in the matches and so on. So I think this is a direction of travel. It's only going to continue to head one way, as much as we want. But I know an organisation, Spirit of Shankly, they've asked me to do an analysis of what's happened at Liverpool. So I've gone back all the way to 1992, 93, and you look at the increase in prices. And yes, that there have been significant periods of time when we've had freezes in prices, but at the same time, there's been significant increases in the last couple of years. And once that becomes embedded, I think it will become part of the expectation of the owners that they will try to put up prices every year.
See, you say, Kieran, you count the people around you, fellow season ticket holders, as friends. That's because you're irritatingly cheerful. Most normal football fans, Kieran, if they were to walk into a pub in town in July and they saw the bloke 2 rows ahead of them sitting there, you go, I'm going to find another pub because I will not have anything to say to this man during the summer. If I haven't got what about last week to say, I've got nothing to say. I find this really interesting, this analysis, Kieran, because obviously it bucks a trend that we've talked about since this pod started. The match day income is increasingly irrelevant to the biggest clubs. But it also has an impact on the interview that we have for you tomorrow, which was with a disabled fan, a journalist and campaigner called Ellis Palmer. We were talking about the expense for football clubs of making grounds accessible. And we talked about those club owners in the past who have said, well, the thing is, if you take 6 or 7 seats out to make a wheelchair space, then you're losing 6 or 7 tickets on a match day. And we've said, well, match day income is a very small proportion of your general income anyway. But now, if that match day income is becoming a much bigger portion, then that's going to have a knock-on effect for disabled fans, isn't it? Because they're going to be less likely to make space for people who pay less money to enter the game.
Sadly so. I think you will see a forensic approach taken by the suits at some clubs. And football is an industry. Just like show business is a business, and the opportunity to make more money. Clubs have been in a very beneficial position during the teenage years because you had those 2 spectacular TV deals negotiated by the Premier League. So it was actually difficult to justify increasing prices. But what you will see now is that the narrative that will be coming from clubs is, we've got the independent regulator, so there's increased compliance costs. That's complete hogwash, by the way. The regulator is going to cost £10 million a year, and the Premier League's just spent £400 million on agents' fees. But, that will be the narrative which will be put out to the client journalists who will put that out, in order for exclusive interviews and so on. It's the way that the system works. And similarly, the fact that the TV deal's not gone up they'll say, well, we don't want to put up the prices, but we can't put up the prices to TV until the end of the decade, so therefore we're going to have to target you as fans. So I am concerned that more and more people will be priced out of the game, and the vast majority of those people will be replaced. But they will not be replaced by people from SE25 or L4 or M19 or those postcards which have proven to be the bedrock of support for fans of clubs all over the country. And this is not a dig at the international fan or the occasional watcher. It's economics, but it's depressing for anybody who is a legacy fan and who is proud of what football has represented as part of history, culture, identity, and all of the things which you and I hold dear, and I think many other fans do as well.
Yeah. At this point, Kieran, disabled fans listening to this will say, well, most of us don't pay less money to get in, so perhaps I should make it clearer that the clubs make less money out of one disabled fan than they would out of 7 non-disabled fans, would maybe be my point. Now, we mentioned in passing, Kieran, on our last pod, the European clubs who have joined forces against 777 partners who have a stake in several of them. But it's a worldwide phenomenon this now. So there's 7 supporter groups across the world, Kieran, have united in a joint statement against 777.
That's right. And it doesn't reflect particularly well on Josh Wander. No. The conclusion from these fan groups, and they include the likes of FC Paris and Melbourne, Hertha Berlin, who we were talking about on Tuesday's pod, Sevilla and so on, and Vasco da Gama in South America. They've said, now more than ever, multi-club ownership has been conducive to the takeover of football by nefarious, it's always a good word, nefarious entities like 777 partners. This scourge must be fought by fans the world over. It's urgent that 777 immediately leave our clubs. Now, I think that is wishful thinking that they'll immediately leave. But, we've seen the militancy of some fan groups and the impact that they've had. Red Star Paris, I think they were promoted at the weekend, and they had a tifo out behind one of their main stands, and they say, there are those who make our colours shine, supporters, players and stuff. You can feel, especially they'll be seeing something in French at the same time. And you can imagine the pride as they do that. And then they go, and those who trample on our values, 777.
Yeah.
So it's quite clear that Wander & Co., they've never been popular, and now they are increasingly becoming seen as the big bad wolves, which they should be seen as. They have not done anything for any of those football clubs on a positive basis. When the clubs have been successful, it's been on the basis of the managers and the coaches, but there's been too much uncertainty at too many of those clubs.
The Standard Liège story is still relatively new, Kieran, because their supporters had a game abandoned, didn't they, last week when their demonstration against 777. And the Jupiler League authorities in Belgium have said there will be very strong sanctions against Standard Liège and their fans because of this. And Standard Liège and their fans, well, the fans certainly have said, well, so be it, because they would rather take the sanctions and make the stand. And I think that just shows the strength of feeling against 777. And again, I wish I had 10 quid for the amount of times we said this, Kieran. It's just yet another reason to ponder why the Premier League haven't yet said 777 are not suitable partners for Everton. If every other club that 777 are involved in have united to say we don't want them, how can there still be any possibility that they take over one of the greatest clubs in English football history?
There is. I mean, in defence of the Premier League, they've not taken over Everton Football Club. The Premier League will have taken legal counsel. And I suspect that given they cannot force Farhad Moshiri to say 777 are the preferred partners, as what they can do is to say, well, you've not passed the owners and directors test. These are the conditions. Those conditions are pretty onerous. And 777 appear to have come no closer to satisfying those conditions. So here, I think the Premier League are anxious to avoid a speculative lawsuit from 777 by simply saying you're not going to become owners. But they've made the small print so challenging that it's going to effectively do that unless 777 manage to find a load of money from a benefactor. And then the first thing I'll be saying is, who is this benefactor? Where have they got the money from? They appear to have done nothing positive. And, we look at it through a football lens, but there's jobs being lost. There are people that are being delayed being paid. There's an awful lot of uncertainty involved. And Josh Wander's just running around with the goofy, oh, I've got a baseball cap on. Oh, I'm a bit of a scamp, aren't I? We like being sued because we think it's edgy. No, it's not.
Hi, I'm Steve Lemack, and every week I'm joined by Music Ally's Head of Insight, Stuart Dredge, on The Price of Music, the weekly podcast all about the money behind the music industry. In each episode, we discuss the very latest goings-on in the music business and dig into the finances behind the big stories.
So whether you're a music lover who just wants to know more about what really goes on in the industry, or you're an aspiring musician, manager or label owner who wants some inside knowledge on how Spotify's financial model really works, or what the future holds for independent live music venues, this is a show for you.
Subscribe to The Price of Music in your podcast app now. See you soon.
God knows I'm not as irritatingly cheerful as you, Kieran. Well, I'm not necessarily grumpy, but somewhere between Maguire at one end and Eeyore at the other, you'll find me in the middle, possibly more towards the Eeyore end. But my mouth turns down at the corners, so I look a bit sulky even when I'm really, really happy, Kieran. You would have seen me leaving Selhurst Park, Palace winning 5-0, still looking a bit glum, but that's my mouth, turns down at the corners. But I'm cheerful enough, Kieran, I normally try and find a sort of upbeat way to introduce a story. But unfortunately, this next one, the connotations of this story are so sinister and unpleasant, I can't find any way into it other than just to say, tell us what's happening with Aston Villa and Burnley.
Well, yes, it's happening in relation to their sponsors, BK8. And, we've mentioned these guys before, but a huge credit is deserved in the direction of Josimar, the investigative journalism website, for which I'm happy to subscribe. They do the stuff which is not glamorous. But this is in relation to the sponsors, BK8. Now, BK8 were very, very briefly a shirt sponsor at Norwich City Football Club before Norwich City fans, and hats off to them, they said, who are these people? Went and looked, and it was a gambling website. The vast majority of punters appear to be in sort of the Malaysia region, and they're sort of using sexualized pictures of young women as a means of trying to encourage people to interact. And Norwich fans said, that doesn't really go with us. Yeah, we're not that keen. It's perfectly legal. So that's why Aston Villa said, and Aston Burnley said, well, they've offered us the most money, we're going to take it. And that's the choice, and that's the values of the owners, not necessarily the fans. But what Josimar have done, because there have been a few stories, and I've read the full article, and it really is very, very unpleasant. BK8 are linked to a Cambodian cybercrime and human trafficking compound. And I use that word compound with a degree of distaste. But what this organization appears to be doing is offering jobs to people, many of them sort of in that Asian area, so from Vietnam, Cambodia, and that area, offering them jobs as administrators or working online. And then what they effectively do is that they get forced to work for long hours. You can't leave. There are threats made, very unpleasant threats made against female members of staff as well. So all of this is pretty reprehensible. So how have BK8 managed to get a license to be a gambling company in the UK? They go via the Isle of Man, because the Isle of Man, as there's a company called TGP Europe, which is what we sometimes refer to as a white label. If you try to place a bet with BK8 here in the UK, there's hardly anything to do. So you can't place. And if you take a look as to where all of the traffic is coming from, again, it's coming from the Asian markets, which are being targeted. And you look at some of the elements of the website and you go, if you want to be gambling with But these people, it's high risk, but that's the nature of gambling. And yeah, we've always said we both of us gamble, but we try to have some degree of respect for the people with whom we're interacting. This doesn't appear to be the case. Where it's going to end up, I suspect nowhere. I know that Josimar have asked Villa, Burnley, the Premier League, the Gambling Commission. They've asked them for comments and they just get nothing back. And if you've got nothing good to say, then surely they should be getting some form of response. So it's just depressing. And I know that if you do bring up the subject, and I understand it from a fan's perspective, they say, look, we just want to go and win football matches. It doesn't mean that we are supporting these activities. But as individual fans, we do have a voice, and there are many people turning a blind eye because you're blinded by the cheque.
The fan reaction is an interesting one, Kieran, because it was the last day of the season at Selhurst Park on Sunday. They had a retro shirt day, so you were surrounded by old shirt. And we had this conversation. It's amazing how much more comfortable I feel looking at a shirt with Cinch on it than I am looking at a shirt with ManBet X on it. And, Cinch essentially are a used car dealer on a big scale. We've got new sponsors coming up next season, and you just hope that it is a reputable company, because what this story shows as well, Kieran, when you talk about Norwich fans and you talk about Josimar, is that football club owners, football club branders, marketeers, financial executives, etc., need to know that fans and journalists are ahead of them. They need to do their research. They need to make sure that the people paying them money for the front shirt sponsorship are proper, reputable companies, because the fans won't have it. We saw that with Stake at Chelsea. If the fans think something smells wrong, they increasingly have a voice to make that known, don't they? Even if it's simply not buying the shirts.
Yes, yeah. And, we do have a choice as fans. And I absolutely understand the position of the fans of other clubs who have taken the deals. They say, sometimes you have to hold your nose.
Yeah, of course.
The club's desperate for money, and that's the view that we've taken. And ultimately, I want 3 points more than to be able to hold the moral high ground. And that's not a criticism of fans of the clubs that are wearing these shirts, but you like to take pride in your club at a variety of levels. And this is one area where I don't think the fans of Villa or Burnley will be particularly pleased. Yeah, ultimately, it's their decision, of course.
Well, it looks like Inter Milan fans will be pleased this week. Kieran, should they be?
Yes, in the sense that the Chinese owners of Internazionale, Suning, they had a deadline. Now, we're recording this on Wednesday morning. I think they had a deadline of midnight on Tuesday night in respect of a €400 million loan to an organisation called Oak Tree Capital. And it looks as if they've defaulted on the loan. And therefore, it would appear that Inter are going to have new owners. Now, are Oak Tree Capital interested in running a football club in Italy? I suspect not. So what it looks like is that there's going to be a shift of ownership. The bills are being paid. I think there's a danger of the club going bust or anything like that. And already, anybody that's been scouring the internet on Wednesday morning or later, people are coming out and say, yeah, I'm interested in buying into, and who wouldn't be? It's a magnificent club with an amazing history. So I think there's a guy called Thomas Zilakis from Finland who said, yeah, I'm interested. How realistic his bid is, we don't know. If you want to become famous these days, just put in a bid for a football club and stick it up on the internet. It's amazing the number of interactions you'll get. But the finances of Inter have not been great. Suning, along with many Chinese investors, have been looking for exit routes for quite a few years. And it looks as if they've not come up with the cash, which they borrowed. So you don't mess around with American lenders, especially, the likes of Oak Tree. They'll just simply say, right, you default, we're taking the shares, do one.
Yeah, we don't know much about this chap from Finland, Kieran, do we? But I will predict that being from Finland, he won't be irritatingly cheerful. As a nation, they'd veer towards the Eeyore without that, based on all the Finnish people I met. Now, the other night, Kieran, I watched a documentary I'd never seen before about Muhammad Ali and his relationship with Dick Cavett, who was a sort of American version of Michael Parkinson in the 70s, only quicker and funnier. And Ali did his show a lot. And of course, the Rumble in the Jungle came up. And at the moment, it must seem, Kieran, for Southend fans, that they are in a ring against George Foreman, just constantly being punched in the face. And you just hope that there will be a little bit of rope-a-dope and that they will bounce off these ropes and get some good news soon. But it doesn't seem like it at the moment, does it?
No, it doesn't. And whilst contracts have been exchanged, and these were exchanged in December with a potential new owner who, by all accounts, has already put in about £3.5 million for infrastructure investment and so on, as far as Southend United are concerned. They are now under a new National League transfer embargo. Now, we did cover Southend United last week, and let's face it, we had a bit of a giggle because they were being sued by the people that normally representing them in court when they're being sued. This is for non-payment of bills. But the National League, and I'm not the National League's biggest fan by a long, long way, they do have, to be fair to them, some fairly strict rules when it comes to winding up orders. And if there isn't a satisfactory resolution of them, then you are subject to a transfer embargo. Why is this? Well, Southend fans on Monday night attended a meeting with the local council. The council, and this will come as a shock to many people, the council have reservations about Ron Martin. I can't think why. It's because there are some real estate issues. There are some, Ron Martin wants to make money from property. Yeah. The council are doing their due diligence. They said in January, after contracts were exchanged, we think that due diligence will take us 6 to 8 weeks. That would have taken us presumably to March. Well, we're now in the second half of May. Yeah. Why has it taken too long or more than you'd expected? Well, I suspect Mr. Martin hasn't necessarily been as helpful, given that he's not helpful with anybody else. I can't see he's going to be helpful with the council. So the council is protecting its interest. The local MP has become involved as well. And the prospective of new owners have said, we put in £3.5 million, but it doesn't guarantee that the deal is going to go through. We reserve our right, if we think we're being messed around, to ultimately walk away. And clearly that's given Southend United fans a little bit of concern. From my understanding of the prospective new owners, they are still keen and they want it to proceed, but it's dragging on too long. Ron Martin likes brinkmanship. Yeah. He's done that with the number of winding up orders that we've seen historically, and he seems to get some pleasure out of it. I don't know why. It costs him money in legal fees every single time he does it, but it seems to be sort of a point of principle with him. So, as always with Southend United, it's one step forward and one step back at the same time.
If after all these years of dealing with Ron Martin, the worst Southend Council can say is they have reservations, then they really need to listen to some of our back catalogue of pods, Kieran, because that's the worst. We have some reservations. We use the comparison of buying a house a lot, Kieran, because it's the simplest one there is. It's like I've tried to find a way of roller coaster. There's nothing else that goes up and down like a roller coaster, so you eventually find yourself saying roller coaster ride. So we use the house buying comparison. But if you'd exchanged contracts for a house in December and had since spent £3.5 million renovating that house, and yet it still wasn't your house, you're showing remarkable patience there, Kieran, or at least a remarkable willingness to buy that house. And it seems to me that's what it's like with the potential new owners at Southend, which I suppose could be a glimmer of optimism for Southend fans, going, well, these guys clearly want to take us over.
Yes, and I think it was a sign of good faith at the time from the owners, and they are from Australia, that this deal was going to take place. And as far as they were concerned, they were happy with their side of the arrangement. But threes often don't work, as many of my friends will testify. And having the council and Ron Martin and the new owners involved has proven to be a very complex and irritating scenario.
I'm just going to clarify, Kieran, prior to that door slamming there. Did you say threes often don't work?
Yes.
Yeah, that might be why the door slammed. Is it? What's upset Finley then?
The Baroness has just come back. So he's now gone into, it's about time somebody gave me a wonky shomp mode, because I've had the headphones on for the last 2 hours.
Yeah, he's just gone to grass you up. So Daddy's just been talking about threes, mummy. things not brilliant at Southend and things not brilliant at Morcambe either.
No. Yeah, we often say appearing on the price of football once every 6 months is probably okay. Appearing once every month is tends to be bad news. And this is a really frustrating situation. You and I, we supported our clubs for many, many years. There's been times when things haven't been good. And as fan groups, you'll go, sack the board. And yeah, we're used to that. This is the very first time I've ever known the board to be shouting, sack the owner.
Yeah.
The board have actually put up an open letter on the club website, effectively addressed to Jason Whittingham. There used to be two owners of Morcambe FC. That is down to one. The other owner was, I believe, unable to practice within the legal fraternity for a period of time. And I was at a law conference earlier this week, and I was talking to some of our secret lawyers, and I was saying, "What is this guy doing?" And they just go, "Even by the standards of the most rogue lawyers of." That you sometimes see in American television, this guy has not helped the reputation of the profession, which is a real shame. But the remaining owner, Jason Whittingham, has been effectively accused of the politest way I can think is dragging his heels. He's made various promises with respect to funding. He's made historic claims that there has been interested parties from the US. There's been interested parties from the Middle East, and without giving too many details away, I quite often end up on Zoom conversations with people from America and the Middle East, and I can tell within about 30 seconds that I'm dealing with time wasters and tire kickers and so on. So just because you have a conversation with somebody, what you shouldn't be then saying is building up the hopes of the board of directors, of the fan base of Morcambe FC. And there's another concern, and I suspect that Morcambe are not alone in this, is that if you take a look at their retained list, they'll be struggling to put out a five-a-side team at present. Because players have been released, players have gone home to the clubs from which they've been loaned, contracts have been renewed. I think they've only got 3 players to whom contracts have continuing. I think they've got an extension on one more. How do you operate in a professional industry when you've got no staff? But those are effectively your front of house staff. So it's shambolic. Not been a good 7 days for people in Morcambe all round, following the boxing, because Tyson Fury's a resident of the town as well. And you can it grinds the fans down. And this is always a concern for me, because we saw at Macclesfield Town and other clubs where you've got owners that are just constantly pushing things to the limit. Eventually more and more people become disillusioned and they drop off. But fair play to the board of directors here, because it's a brave thing to do, but they are aware of their fiduciary duties, and they are clearly all Morcambe FC fans as well.
Well, if any of those directors or any Morcambe fans or fans representatives want to talk to us and elaborate on this situation, we'd love to hear from you. Our final 2 questions, Kieran, and we might have to nip through these quite quickly because my ex-groundsman from Selhurst Park has turned up to deal with what I can only call a terrifying bamboo incursion. Seriously, the cat looks like she's in bamboo prison. I have to keep whistling the tune from Bridge Over the River Choir. Graham, God love him, he knows I'm podcasting, but he's got a really noisy strimmer and some headphones, so he also thinks I'm slightly bourgeois. So he's going to be making noise in a minute, Kieran. So let's get these 2 stories done. They're both about ex-Chelsea midfielders. The second story, Kieran, I think illustrates everything that's mad about football at the moment financially. But the first one is a former Chelsea midfielder arrested in Australia.
Yes, and that former Chelsea midfielder is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Never actually played for the club, but he was recruited. I think this is Ulysses Dagier, but along with Clayton Lewis and Kieran Bacchus. Now, I'm used to the name Kieran being spelt in a variety of ways, but the Australian variant of Kearyn is very new to me. And they play for Macarthur FC. And the accusation that's been made is that there has been spot fixing taking place in the A-League. By all accounts, there were 21 identical bets placed in South America for there to be more than 3.5 yellow cards. So club, they're not losing matches. They're controlling the controls. It's quite easy to get a yellow card. Just kick the ball away. A free kick. Just go and take somebody out. So this is linked to cartels in South America, and it looks as if I think some of the British gambling companies spotted this, because they do have. It's amazing how their checks and balances do work when there is evidence of fraud, and fair play to them for that. They seem to be a little bit more relaxed when there's clearly signs of gamblers in distress, but that's for another discussion. So there could be further investigations undertaking. There's rumours of a fourth player being involved in respect of this. And why is it taking place in Australia rather than Germany or Italy? Or so? Ultimately, it comes down to money. Because if you're a Premier League footballer, why take a couple of grand as a bung to get a yellow card if you're on 70 or 80 grand a week? The level of wages in Australia are quite modest, and therefore the incentives to fix a game are perhaps a greater proportion of your take home.
Kieran, I speak as somebody here who once got sent off twice in the same game. How do you get half a yellow card?
That's the bet on offer, especially in the Asian markets, that if there's 3 yellow cards, you lose the bet. And if there's 4 yellow cards, you win the bet. So they say, so the tipping point is 3.5.
Right.
How did you get sent off twice in a single match?
Well, no, our Sunday league team, a friend of ours, went off to become a priest, which was really annoying because all the rest of our mums kept saying, see, Patrick, why can't you? But he went off to become a priest, and we played a friendly against his seminary team. I can assure you, Kieran, that playing against 11 men between the ages of 21 and 24 who have just realised they're not going to have sex for the rest of their life, it was a physical. They really tried to take it out on us. I got sent off. Seriously, I got sent off the first time because this bloke battered me from behind, and I went, Jesus Christ, ref. And the ref sent me off for blaspheming. And I thought, and we travelled about 50 miles to this seminary. Well, I'm not getting sent off after 10 minutes, so I sneaked back on. And then I got sent off for throwing a punch, which missed. So kind of gentler times. Yeah, but just as we left on this, we hired this, but as we left on the bus, I just remember one of my mates looking back at the seminary going, that place must really shake at night. The final story, Kieran, involves Eden Hazard, who's now retired. But this, as I say, indicates the true madness of football finance in the world, doesn't it, at the moment?
That's right. Eden Hazard, in all of the time I've been watching Brighton play at the Amex, gave the best performance of any player I've seen. It was like watching ballet in a field of wildebeest. And he decided to retire. I think it's fair to say that his experience at Madrid was not a successful one. But the fee that Madrid paid was €100 million plus 40 million of add-ons. And Hazard joined in the summer of 2019, signed a 5-year contract. So that contract expires on the 30th of June 2024. One of those clauses in the add-ons of the contract was, should Real Madrid get to the final of the Champions League, then they have to pay €5 million or £5 million to Chelsea, despite the fact that Hazard has decided to hang up his boots. And that money could go into the Poch redundancy fund. But it does, as you rightly say, show the lunacy of the funding of the game that just causes us to scratch our heads.
6 words, Kieran. All the lawyers had to do was, with that particular add-on clause, £5 million if Real Madrid get to their Champions League final. Surely you add in brackets regarding he's still at the club. That's all it would take, wouldn't it, to save yourself $5 million?
Yes, but they didn't put it in. They needed you. The renowned pub lawyer, Kevin Day, of Pawson's Arms and Co.
Yeah, they may have saved themselves that £5 million, but they'll have lost about 150 million quid somewhere else where I'd have signed something off wrong. God, this burger deal looks What? How much are we paying for burgers? Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution as well, that would be very kind of you, and you'll get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes. End of season quiz is coming up on the 6th of June. And if you want to take part, you can go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. You can go to questions@priceoffootball.com if you have a question you'd like answered on our Tuesday questions pod, I beg your pardon. And if you'd like to buy our book, you can go to the same website, priceoffootball.com. And the Price of Football is, of course, on Twitter or X, if you prefer, and it's on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, so if you're a fan of the show, you can follow us on Twitter at POF_POD, and subscribe to the Price of Football on YouTube. We'll be back with our next questions pod on Tuesday. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, as always, thank you for everybody. Thanks for all of those Palace fans that have been looking after me for the past few days, worried about my welfare, and reminding me that there are 11 players on the pitch. I don't know why the number 11 kept coming up so often. It's nice to know that you can, and I appreciate that. There's various ways you can support the show. Patreon is one, and thank you to all of our Patreons. If you want the ad-free version of the show. And I think we can tentatively say that the end of season quiz is taking place on the 6th of June. So free up your diaries if you want to listen to two middle-aged blokes half-assed going through a list of somewhat random questions about football. But we look forward to meeting you all there. And if you want to support the show another way, give us a review on your app. Doesn't matter what you say. I've spent the last few days, I've had a bit of a road to Damascus here in respect of Jeremy Clarkson.
Oh.
I've been watching Clarkson's Farm, and it is brilliant. And he plays the curmudgeon, but actually he comes out of this very well indeed. And for Jeremy Clarkson's next series of Clarkson's Farm, he's looking for somebody to work with who's got experience of working in the country, of working with plants and so on. And who better than Dan Ashworth, because he's spending an awful lot of time in the garden at present.
Very good. Nice one. I wondered where you were going with that, but you ended it very elegantly. Well done. Bye, everybody. Mind the gap.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.